Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. What the Australian people are witnessing right now is an unfolding catastrophe that threatens the livelihoods and economic viability of Australia. And unlike COVID-19, this economic catastrophe is completely man-made and a result of reckless policy and thoughtless planning from the government. Madam Acting Deputy President, the catastrophe that I refer to is the artificial energy crisis of the government's own creation that will occur from their ill-conceived policies such as the energy price cap that we saw come in through this chamber blindingly fast without any chance to any of us to talk to it or debate it late last year. And on top of that, their rewiring the nation plan will be a catastrophe. And the government have made it extremely clear by now they intend to forge on down this reckless path and seem intent on choosing the most uneconomical and costly path to reduce emissions, with no consideration of the economic consequences that will unfold. We've heard this from almost every sector of society about how dangerous this government's energy plans are and how little thought they have put into conducting an orderly transition to net zero. When I attended COP27 in Egypt last year, one thing was abundantly clear, that whether you like it or not, the transition to net zero is happening and going to happen. It's a tidal wave coming of enormous proportions, so everyone better get on board. However, it was a real shame that COP was attended by so few of those opposite, because if they were there, they would have heard for themselves from experts around the world that this transition is going to be long and is going to be hard and it is going to be very expensive, but not as expensive as Labor are planning on making it. The aim of the transition to a renewable energy grid is not just about recklessly scattering solar panels and wind farms across the country, then paying billions of dollars to connect them to the grid, as the government intends to do through their Rewiring the Nation plan, because this will leave us with an unstable grid that will result in soaring energy costs, blackouts and economic ruin. Yet, despite the Albanese government repeatedly blaming the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the coalition on energy policy to explain Australia's steadily rising power bills, the impact of current and proposed policy is key to the uncertain future of domestic energy prices and investment. The government's reasoning behind this energy crisis is due to the global impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, it is important to note that prior to the invasion, the Brent oil price was at $80 per barrel, and the ACCC reported that the netback LNG price was at $41.24 per gigajoule. So despite the events in Ukraine exacerbating the challenges in the LNG market, it's clear that this issue has been prevalent globally and in Australia for a decade or more due to a lack of investment in new supply. And states such as my own home state of Victoria can well be blamed for that. Despite having an abundant amounts of natural gas, the Victorian Labor government intend on prohibiting Australians from accessing it, thereby reducing supply and increasing the cost of gas for Victorian businesses. And now this Labor government have essentially nationalised the gas market and put the expectation on private companies to continue to put their own capital at risk in the market to keep this essential industry and resource abundant, while simultaneously making the operating conditions unviable for anyone who's prepared to invest in it. This kind of ludicrous and irrational policy making will only result in further reductions of supply and increased costs and instability. And the market has already responded to this. ExxonMobil and Woodside, which jointly own some of the biggest sources of gas in the domestic market, reduced their forward investment commitment to a 6-month timeframe. Now, these are projects that take years to develop, and they are citing the government's and I quote, reckless intervention in the gas market for doing so. And, Madam Acting Deputy President, the supply shortage of gas should not come as a surprise to anyone, or no one can claim that they didn't see it coming. AEMO, in their GSU, Gas Statement of Opportunities, have been telling this for a long period. And just last year, when the ACCC released their gas report, they said, and I quote, "Supply conditions in the East Coast market are expected to deteriorate significantly in 2023, with a shortfall of 56 petajoules now expected. This is equivalent to around 10% of domestic demand and is the largest projected supply shortfall we have forecast since the inquiry commenced in 2017. Close quote. Now, when Minister Bowen came out and tried to defend his absurd price cap in January, he cited Treasury figures from the 21st of December of the wholesale price of energy, stating that, I quote, "The figures released show that the intervention, while we still have some way to go, we still have some more work to do, is having an impact." However, this data was before the price cap had even come into effect on the 23rd of December. And the government know that their policies will result in increased costs. In fact, the Treasurer's last budget in October forecasts an additional 56% jump in retail prices. Despite going to the polls at the last election, promising to cut bills for households by $275, now all they can promise is to make the cost of living harder than it has to be. While the shift to a low or zero emission energy is unstoppable and accelerating, the transition to a 100% renewable grid will require a role for gas and perhaps coal to supplement the renewable energy and provide firming capacity for the grid until zero emissions technologies become more mature as a solution to firming the grid when it's running on 100% renewables. This was made clear in JP Morgan's 2022 annual energy paper, which explicitly states that countries that reduce production of fossil fuels under the assumption that renewables can quickly replace them face substantial economic and geopolitical risks. If the energy transition is to succeed, we cannot disconnect the generation methods we have before we have a replacement for it. It has become abundantly clear that this government has not even considered grid stability or supply security in their Rewiring the Nation plan. Just last week we heard on the ABC from top energy expert Dylan McConnell that Australia is adding renewable energy at less than half the pace required to replace retiring coal-fired generation and meet its own 2030 climate targets. Of course, there is the obvious solution to firming the grid that will allow Australia to reach its emissions reduction goals much, much sooner than 2050, and that is nuclear power. As a mature, ready-to-implement emissions-free technology, Australia is absolutely mad not to pursue this technology. The Treasurer's, I won't say the word, crazy 6,000-word essay on reimagining capitalism, redefining how we define a successful economy, says it all about this government. Not only do they know that their policies will make it more difficult for Australians, instead of actually trying to make things better, now they want to move the goalposts and give themselves a participation medal. Newsflash, guys. If the lights aren't on and Australians can't afford to live, that is not a successful economy. And it's time the government gets that through their head before they attempt to nationalise the rest of Australia. Let us not forget that sharp rises in energy prices have preceded several global recessions, with the most famous coming from the OPEC oil embargo in the 1970s. Similarly, the 2008-2009 recession, there was a 150% increase in oil prices. And somehow, this government thinks that reducing supply and nationalising the energy market is a good idea and that it won't lead to energy prices and a potential recession. I think we'll find out it will. Thank you.